All right, well, thank you. So, my name is Tom Anderson. I teach at the law school at the University of Florida. I also run a program in Costa Rica where I involve our students in very experiential opportunities to study the intersection of law, science, and policy. I will stand over there.
Or you move the camera, but you need to stay still.
Okay. Rather be closer to people. So the first thing I want to tell you is, at the law school, it's a little different over there. And so when I was telling students and colleagues that I was going to the Amazon meeting, they thought I was going to Seattle to meet with Steve Bezos. So we got a little work to do there too. The name is dropping down at least one on the ladder. So we're going to talk about a process. It's a tool that could involve all of the tools that you were just provided in the last two sessions. And I think that's sort of its power. It's a tool that can be used at multiple scales. It's robust to both scale, it's robust to uncertainty, and it's robust to time. All of those things make it useful. It can be stakeholder driven. And it has been proven to be an effective tool for opening people's eyes and minds at multiple scales to the future. And I think that's its real benefit here, and you'll hear much more about that from my colleagues. My exposure to it came in the process of working on a project at the law school involving sea level rise in Florida, which of course is very much an issue of time and speed. And we brought together scholars from around the country, particularly those states that have that are coastal states that are experiencing sea level rise, and worked through a 2-day process with one of our colleagues here, Juan Carlos Vargas, to perform this scenario planning exercise at the level of academics. As a scholarly exercise, it was quite interesting, quite exciting. We're still producing things as a result of the partnerships and collegiality that we developed as a result of that. One of them is a collaboration with our virtual reality lab, where we are taking those scenarios and turning them into VR experiences. That's a work in progress, but that was an outcome of this. I think it's a very powerful tool. It might make some sense in this broader Amazonian context as well. Our speakers are Juan Carlos Vargas. Juan is a managing principal of Geo-Adaptive Inc. I'll read just a couple sentences from his firm's bio. It's engaged in global sustainability research and consulting group specializing in socio-ecological interactions, spatial economics, infrastructure, and land analysis. It was born as a research lab out of MIT and Harvard to work on, and I like this term, spatializing the future, especially the drivers of climate change and urbanization, both of which are quite significant here. Juan Carlos has his PhD from Harvard University, and in my perspective, he's living the dream because he's going around working in this context 24/7 around the world. And Franklin Paniagua is my friend and colleague for many, many years. Where's Franklin? Right here. Franklin works with me in my Costa Rica program, and we sort of use that program as the basis to what we characterize little Costa Rica as a policy laboratory for sustainable development. Many of the things that are tried there are either left there or they are brought to scale in different contexts, and I think it's valuable and interesting from that perspective. And then a colleague who could not be here, Mariki Veger, who is the scenario policy researcher for the CGIAR research program in climate and agriculture. And she leads the regional program for future scenarios in Latin America. Franklin has begun working very deeply with her, particularly in Central America, and you'll hear some of those case studies. Franklin got engaged in the scenario analysis by leading the Costa Rica discussions for how Costa Rica would participate in the Paris Agreement. So I'll leave it with these guys, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. And I want to thank Marieki and Franklin that has helped us develop this presentation, which is actually the collective effort of a series of discussions that have occurred over the last couple of months. We established ourselves basically to share with, or to be able to achieve three basic goals in today's presentation. The first one is to share some principles and best practices on this tool, scenarios, development, planning, design, however you want to call it, on this tool. In that process, try to do so not by giving you a lecture about what are scenarios and all the different components and etc., but basically through the lenses of our own stories in the use of the scenarios in three particular cases. One in Alaska, one in Central America across all, Honduras and Central America region, and another one in Costa Rica as well. In this process, what we like to do is to discuss the effectiveness of this tool from your perspective. As we are already baptized and convinced of this tool, we would like to very much embrace into a discussion. There's some limitations. We don't want to offend anyone. If you already are expert in this matter, or how to integrate modeling or local knowledge into this, we really know very little about your knowledge and experience and familiarity with these tools. And of course, there's a lot of particularities relative to places of implementation and the scales of implementation that will need to be discussed in detail. Furthermore, we'd like to invite you to visit the posters that we have, several posters, fact sheets that are online, materials that Tom has distributed, hopefully finding ways to continue ways to improve these tools as they're evolving instruments. The why of the tool, what challenges? A good tool responds to a specific set of challenges. And from our perspective, we try to look into the literature, something that will basically capture those dynamics that are very much present also in the Amazon region. First, hopefully this stuff doesn't go away. We're dealing here with a wicked problem. Not only environmental and social changes, but not necessarily agreement relative to institutions, overlapping jurisdictions, like several countries, and of course, a variety and different levels of depth and knowledge across the region. Of course, this happens across multiple scales, biophysically, social scales, institutional alignments, and complexities relative to decision making that all make it incredibly complex. And of course, as such, we cannot address that type of complexity, primarily the sociological complexity and institutional, with our traditional sectoral science or command and control analysis or dashboard tools or traditional management processes. So what we need to do is basically to find innovative approaches and tools that incorporate everything that has been discussed this morning. The modeling tools that are more dynamic, more complex, and more flexible. And of course, as the last set of presenters as well, the diversity of knowledge that needs to be considered in order to move forward. And that needs to be developed as such recognized values, not only knowledge. Places are managed not only based on knowledge or information, but also on the values that we as society print into those particular decisions. And of course, foster communication to build basically what this tool ought to be doing, which is increase collective capacity. As such, we believe, given our experiences, that scenarios, so scenario development, provides a useful tool to address those challenges. Not as a software, not as necessarily a researcher or research like the last person was talking about, but as a process, as a living process that ought to be involving decision makers and actors upfront and throughout the process in order to be an effective tool and in order to be able to explore the future in creating scientific and policy relevant ways, basically to do something that we like to call anticipatory knowledge. When you know what may happen, you may be better positioned to, one, take anticipatory measures, and two, prepare better from multiple ways, including gathering knowledge. What constitutes a good scenario, very quickly? Well, it needs to help with the decisions. It has to be plausible, not just dream scenarios. It has to provide alternatives. It's not a plan, nor is a planning tool. It needs to challenge the organizations or the actors receive wisdom about what the future is. There's not such a thing only as a trend. Many things can happen and changes can happen. Must be consistent, internally logic, to be able to be remembered and distinguished between others. and must be owned and created by those that being affected by the decisions, not but a set of Illuminati on the side, which really know how things may pan out. This process, we believe that this process could create something much bigger than a tool, which is social learning. A learning or a knowledge that can be transformative and can lead to action. One that opens the black box of modeling. I'm saying this being a modeler too, by the way. Opening that black box and therefore making the decision process more democratic across all sectors. And of course, the most important thing, creating a sustainable forms of engagement. So decisions, not a decision, a set of ecosystem decisions are sustained and well done. So why to use them? Well, we have unpredictable, integrated, and uncontrolled ways of dealing with, or systems. Two, we need to incorporate a breadth of ideas about the future, and we need a platform of social learning. Most importantly, we need to be able to link models and stories or storylines from those people that know more about the land than us, and to link stakeholders, policymakers, and modelers in what I like to call the learning cycle about scenarios. And in doing so, I'm going to present only one case, and then I'm going to let Frank continue with some of Case and Mariaki's incredible cases and experiences. The first one I want to talk to you is about very far from the Amazon, but very similar in many different ways, which is Alaska's North Slope. It's about 1 million square kilometers, not as large as Amazon, but very complex in nature from both social and biophysical perspective, incredibly susceptible and fragile to the climate as well, and with many interests from the resource extraction perspective, mining, gas, etc., oil. And we were called to work there and to basically help them understand what trajectories of change they may encounter given different drivers of change and how commodities may change, oil, gas, minerals, and how will climate change affect that land that is being managed in some ways, and how this was going to affect also the indigenous populations there. What we decided to do was close the computers, put them away, and begin a process to understand what knowledge was needed as a minimum to understand the synergistic relationship between the drivers of change, as such that we'll be able to look at the intersection of these drivers, what decision may be needed, what knowledge may be needed to move forward. It's very similar to the exercise that we run last night in the cafe. But in this process, us serve basically as facilitators of the process, capturing, writing signs, creating a uniform lexicon or language of how these changes in these drivers may take or touch ground, and what impacts they may have. The important thing is in this very tiny graph over here, that the scenario process is not linear. There's not a beginning and an end. There may be beginnings of ends of projects, but not of a scenario process if it is conducted well. First, we invite experts to share knowledge, to say, what do you know about this region? How do you think it's going to change? We create a process that only about 8 months of several workshops, only understanding that and creating leveling that knowledge. Then we look at the interrelationships between the knowledge of all these individuals, creating basically like cognitive webs that were actually done in Post-its and streets. We and the rest of the modelers actually represented those interactions in multiple features at a time horizon and told them about the plausible impacts. But the only they were able to implement, internalize what those impacts may mean for them, as such that they see what new knowledge is needed to continue making science or to make important action, and therefore what relationships and such. We went through this cycle for a period of 3 years. What results we generated? First, and most importantly, the prioritization of areas of concern for multiple stakeholders. In public policy, we call this arenas of bounded conflict. That allows us to narrow the discussion about how to move forward. We created interdisciplinary discussions and knowledge sharing networks that now today is still alive in sharing these interactions and how to inform better informed decision making. But most importantly, we debate an argument for scientific and civil science collaborations to make sure that there's a more, I'm not going to say completely democratic, but more integrated knowledge process. Important thing, we talk about this, we help them with a series of tools, very simple, anyone can do it, to look at the different arrangements of different drivers based on the science that was presented by participants, model it, and then we ended up with them in action plans, including the continuation of the cycling process. There's a poster about this. I have some handouts if you want to know more about it. I'm happy to share any more information. I would like to pass it now to Franklin, which has way more interesting things to share with all of you.
I do not, but I want to briefly start by describing how what's the methodology, specific scenario methodology that we use, and this comes from ICA, which is a CGIAR project. And basically the initial work is to identify the factors of change, which normally dealing with socioeconomic development have to do with markets, whether they're regulated or not, and the wealth distribution, whether it's competitive or not. And then through a combination of factors that make up those two broader variables, you create a matrix where you have basically 4 scenarios that mix up those two factors of change. From those four quadrants, you develop those scenarios. So each scenario will describe the mix of those 2 variables. And this is for a very quick and dirty engagement with scenarios. So this could be over a 2-day or a not 5 minutes, as John is trying me to complete, but a very quick involvement. And I know that Costa Rica is a municipio-sized country for the Amazon, but as I just learned, we are a hope spot. And if we were in the Amazon, we would probably be Alterdo Chao in Altamira. So that's what we like to compare ourselves to. What we had for the development of our INDC, and this is the proposal that the country had to bring to Paris, we had a situation where we had 2 conditions. We had very weak information to actually develop models about what the future of our emissions was going to be. So we couldn't trust the information that we had, and we couldn't reach as far as 50 or 100 years to see what that would be. So what we actually, in the way that scenarios was used, was to develop a vision of that, a narrative vision of what we wanted the country to be, and that through backcasting, try to see how we would meet, what would be the kind of things that we will need to do to meet that goal. So it was not through modeling, it was the other way around. It was going back from the future. The result of that is that we had an emphasis, or not on the number of emissions that we had to reduce, but the conditions that needed to be created for that. So it's an emphasis on that governance and on the institutional aspect of developing that INDC. And thankfully, it was a very successful process in which, through the engagement of the different sectors, we had more of a commitment. Actually, when we went in to develop the case, we expected in a very negative and aggressive position from the private sector in particular, and what we ended up having was a private sector that was waiting for the government to move. So it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to propose to this challenge that we have? It was a very interesting, not expected reaction. But what I wanted to emphasize in my 2 minutes left is it's the idea of what do you do, because we have mentioned at different moments throughout the day and yesterday this idea of you need to involve stakeholders. But what happens at contact? What happens when you're actually there with them? How is that experience, and how you turn that into a fruitful experience? One of the things that we find is that there needs to be a lot of previous explanation of the methodology. Why are we considering the future? Why are we not just sticking to the very urgent and the very need things that are in front of us? And that takes time. It takes time for people just to understand those 4 quadrants and why and how they're going to be used. And it's time well invested when you take time to explain that methodology to the stakeholders you're inviting in. it's important to provide them with sufficient background materials as the ones that we're just distributing around, but don't expect people to read them. What it provides is a sense of security of these guys know what they're doing and know where they're going. And that's what you're aiming at, not at people reading them. The trust building is the real investment here, and it's about understanding and being able to explain the methodology and the process, but it's critical to have knowledge about the substance. So we did the broader INDC process in 2005, and now this year we've been conducting a follow-up process with the agricultural sector. So being able to understand what are the challenges of our agricultural sector and what are the different conditions of how coffee and cattle and sugarcane are changing is critical element. So you need a expert facilitator or a facilitator expert team to be able to run this smoothly. And a critical thing about this idea of focusing on the future is it's managing disputes. The idea of the future provides, as I am going to quickly finish saying, is like a mind trick regarding whether what you're doing is serious enough. And I think that what I think scenarios provide is it's a bit of gamification. It's a chance for people to relax in terms of the fact that we're not going to fight over the decision that we have to make. So we're thinking about the future. You can take it easy, but it's also a serious thing. It's also seriously thinking about something that is not thought in that way, and driving people through the anxiety of we need solutions now, particularly the civil society and more private sector versus the more we need to think and we need more information type of folks. So driving that balance through the idea of, we're just thinking, we're having a little bit of fun, and then you're allowed to have a little bit of fun as you think this through. It is a very important element. I'm gonna turn it up to Juan Carlos to finish, and I'll leave it at there just to commit with time. We can talk more about this.
Just a quick note. If this is such a magic water, if this tool is so good, why is not more widely used? And so we want to put like a tint of reality here. That is not about the tool, it's about how you use it and how you set up your process to use this tool that, if developed adequately, can be incredibly useful. Few, not four, actually, sorry about that. Few points of why or reasons why our scenarios are not more widely used. First, in traditional decision making, it provides uncertainty in conclusions. A lot of decision makers want to see the statistical point of uncertainty of any of these potential paths into the future. But the future is indeed uncertain. We don't have the crystal ball. Two, scenario planning does not give a single answer. And a lot of us, in a lot of decisions, the decision makers, what they want is a key recommendation to move forward. What it does is that it improves the environment of decision making such that those decisions can be just made on a better platform of information. They're counterintuitive to managerial simplicity. Manager wants a path forward that is very clean, and the scenarios provide not a path forward, provide a series of ramifications with fruits at the end, which are the understanding of the implications of different trajectories. There are soft methods, and therefore provide sometimes some answers, and that's what I want to bring some of the initial presentation with the friends talk very much about incorporation modeling and creating that more precise information and science, and that is the type of person we need to start bringing more into the scenario-based process. They can be, running one afternoon, like we have done before with Tom and at the law school. They also can be multi-year assessments, and in that multi-year assessment in complex regions and such, it may consume substantial time and resources. But one of the important things is that it challenged the integration of legislation and in the decision-making process, sometimes because when we talk about integrating information into scenarios, and the decision jurisdictions and such are very segmented and siloed, then the question is how we then disassemble these scenarios and put them back into the silos as such that most decision making. And those considerations have to be taken into the account in order to be adequately used. And that's why many of them are not adequately used or more widely used. Our emails, information, I'm glad to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time.
So first of all,